नमस्कार. जंगल एकोसच्या या भागामध्ये तुम्हा सगळ्यांचं खूप खूप स्वागत आहे. आजचा भाग खूप स्पेशल आहे. हा अख्खा पॉडकास्ट इंग्लिशमध्ये असणार आहे कारण आमच्याबरोबर आहेत डॉक्टर भरूचा सर. डॉक्टर भरूचा सर यांचं काम खूप वेगवेगळ्या फील्ड्समध्ये आहे. त्यातले काही मेन्शनेबल प्रोजेक्ट्स म्हणजे टायगर कन्झर्वेशनसाठी जे काही काम झालेलं आहे त्याच्या अथॉरिटीवरती ते होते. आपल्याकडे जे झूज बघायला मिळतात त्याच्या अथॉरिटीजवरती ते होते. वेटलँड प्रोटेक्शन, ग्रासलँड्स प्रोटेक्शन, सगळ्या पद्धतीच्या इकोसिस्टीमच्या प्रोटेक्शनच्या कार्यामध्ये डॉक्टर भरूचा सरांचं खूप मोठं कॉन्ट्रीब्युशन आहे. शिवाय डॉक्टर सलीम अलींपासनं काम करत असलेले फील्डमध्ये आजही तितक्याच ॲक्टिव्हली आणि तितक्याच एनर्जीनी काम करत असलेले डॉक्टर भरूचा सर आज इथे येऊन सेक्रेड मॅनग्रोव्ज म्हणजेच देवऱ्यांबद्दल बोलणार आहेत. हा अख्खा पॉडकास्ट मी म्हणालो तसं इंग्लिशमध्ये असणार आहे, पण तरीसुद्धा भरूचा सर मध्ये मराठीमध्ये सुद्धा ॲड्रेस करणार आहेत. आय एम व्हेरी एक्सायटेड कारण डॉक्टर भरूचा सरांचं काम आणि त्यांच्याबरोबर शेअर केलेले अनेक इन्सिडन्सेस हॅव इन्स्पायर्ड मी अँड अ लॉट ऑफ अदर वाईल्डलाईफर्स ज्यांना खूप चांगलं काम करायचं आहे कन्झर्वेशनच्या फील्डमध्ये. आजही तितक्याच एनर्जीनी सगळ्या यंगस्टर्सना लाजवेल असं काम डॉक्टर भरूचा फील्डमध्ये करू शकतात. सो मी जास्त वेळ वाया न घालवता डायरेक्टली या कॉन्व्हर्सेशनमध्ये उडी मारतो आहे. सो लेट्स स्टार्ट टुडेज एपिसोड ऑफ जंगल एकोज विथ डॉक्टर भरूचा सर. Sir, welcome to Jungle Echoes and thank you for making it possible today. We are very happy to have you here because it's always...
I'm equally happy to meet you all here.
Yeah. Sir, to begin the conversation, I would first like to ask you, what was your first interaction with nature like?
That goes back, way back when.
That's why I want to take you back to down the memory lane.
Well, my family was immersed in nature. My father, my mother, both of them. My school was very responsible for encouraging me to do this. But then I've had many great mentors in my life. I mean, the largest mentor that I had was Dr. Salim Ali, who, as a small boy, I referred to him as Salim Ali. And the fun was in going out on his motorcycle. And we had a deal, you know. I must have been in 7th, 8th standard in school. So he would come every weekend and to Pune from Bombay on his motorbike. And at that time he was researching bio colonies. And our deal was that if I found him a new bio colony, he would give me a motorbike ride.
He would give you a new motorbike?
No, give me a motorbike ride on his pillion.
Okay.
By the way, the pillion had no seat. It had a metal frame because he used to put his heavy haversack on it.
Okay.
So we would go off to places that I had found on my cycle. And that's the beginning, I think, of my ornithological interest. But then quite soon, I had a very good zoology professor called Professor Nadkarni in Wadia College. And we did a lot of things together, which I think brought me into the science of biodiversity, understanding that all species were important. And that was, I think, Nadkarni's influence on me. And later in life, I had also mentors like people at the WWF. In the WWF, it was Sorabji Godrej. And in today's conversation, we're going to talk about sacred groves where I used to take him there. And there was then this change where after BNHS, which is very dear to my heart, after BNHS and WWF, I realized that how many people did we address to become conservationists or to understand more deeply what environment is about. And for me, that was a very big revelation in my life, that I want to influence a much larger number of people. And I addressed this by saying, how do I get this into curricular processes at school and college?
Into curriculum?
Into curricular processes at school and college level. And at that time, I'd shifted from Sassoon Hospital as a surgeon to Bharati Hospital, and I met another great mentor who was a superb pedagogic person, but nobody ever knew that or realized that. And that was my boss, Dr. Pataka Kadam, who said, hey, samajasati karayala pahije. This has to be done for everybody. Don't think of doing it for Bharati schools or Bharati colleges. And I'll help you set up an institute. And that's how Bharati Vidyapit, my Environment Institute, came up. And the support that and confidence that I got from him was incredible. And we, over the years, changed things, brought in not just environmental sciences, which dealt with various topics of environment science, natural resources, biodiversity, pollution, energy, climate change, and of course my great passion, which was biodiversity conservation. And he supported all this. So I think this was your question. I think I've answered fairly satisfactorily. It could go on for a long time, but yes.
Sir, I was very fortunate to attend this book launch where you spoke very dearly about Dr. Salim Ali, and you shared your experiences with him working in the field and how he used to make you look for answers, and he never used to give you ready-made answers. Would you like to shed some light on that? How important it is to have a right teacher who doesn't do hand-holding in everything and he makes you look for things.
No, I think
find answers.
You're right. I mean, that was one of his. That was his way of passing on a message, and the message always ended up with, what conservation thing will you come out? You've also worked with the BNHS. You know the ethos of BNHS. And what he wanted was that, not only that you got immersed in this, you included a larger group, a larger sort of stakeholder community thing. And that was Salim Ali, very typically. And yes, he would never give you the answers to things directly. He would say to a guy, and I had lots of examples. I've written a small book on Salim Ali, which actually talks about this kind of thing and how he would tell you, look for this, or where do you look for this? And even he would do that. At one point in time, I asked him about some bird which I had seen in Kolhapur, and he said, crab plovers. And he said, let's look it up in a good book. So I was wondering, what good book is he talking about? He took out his own book and made me look for it. I mean, that was his way of teaching you how to learn on your own.
So that's why I asked you this is because whenever I have had an interaction with you, or when I was hearing your talk, I realized that you also, in a way, inspire people to look for answers.
I hope so. I don't know whether I do, but
yeah, you do.
Yes,
and we are all very fortunate students of you, indirect students of you, not direct. But sir, you've worked in a wide spectrum of wildlife management and the zoo managements and everything. But now your main concern is about conservation. And that too about sacred groves.
It's always been, and sacred groves is a topic that I think now has to be reworked in a completely different way. So the old stalwarts who did work on it, Bharucha, Professor Dr. Vartak, who was my mentor in botany, and whatever little botany I know, I think I got it from him bang in the field there. And he was a wonderful man, wonderful human being. And he never had a problem to say, I don't know what this is, but we'll find out. He's another person like that. So Vartak sir actually made me feel that wildlife was not just about tigers and lions and elephants and whatever, but about plant life and about the ecology of plant life. Not too many people have exposure to his concepts like that in a very much more deeper way, where for him a natural landscape was equally important as the botanical specimens that he knew so much about. So I think that was a very big influence.
Sir, how do you look at it? म्हणजे पूर्वी देवराया खूप इम्पॉर्टंट होत्या प्रत्येक गावात जी देवराई होती, एव्हरी सेक्रेड ग्रो हॅड इट्स ओन इम्पॉर्टन्स फॉर द विलेजर्स. What has made it change so much over time? Why the villagers are also now not as respectful towards the devrai or the sacred grove as they were before? And why is it important to conserve this sacred?
Yeah, I think the question is very, very appropriate today, right? If you had asked me the same question 10 years ago, I would have given you a totally different answer.
Yeah.
You have to look at this at a national level, and we can discuss that later. You have to look at this at state level or biogeographic zone level, which is what I will do today. And we also have to look at it as local clusters. Let us say for me it is Mulshi and Western Ghats and so on, clusters of gravelands there. And you ask me what has changed? What has changed people? We have changed people who otherwise thought differently. The people who actually venerated and looked after sacred groves in the past, which is what you asked me, were traditional knowledge holders. And they looked after the sacred grove, not for the grove, but for the deity that they worshipped. And in the Western Ghats here near Pune, the deities are not Vedic deities. They are very, very ancient tribal deities, which they venerated. And they felt that to protect themselves from that deity or get something from the deity that they needed, they should return it something. And that is how they preserved those sacred groves. And today the expert on that is Kailash Malhotra, who has done such a lot of work on this and who really also feels that this change is something that is very scary. And we will have to do something about this, because how are we going to, you can't turn the clock back, bhai. That is not going to happen. You have to look forward and say, what are the options for management? And I'll bring that up today, I think, if you ask me at the end of the program. So I think that is the main thing that needs to be done. So you look at it at a national level today, you look at it at a state or biogeographic level, and we have visuals for all that, which I have taken by traveling across India, which you can include in the talk. And there has been a lot of thinking of mine with other colleagues of mine, both at Bharati Vidyapeeth and outside, to try to understand what are the new options that we can have to save these sacred groves now in today's context. You're right, the cultural significance has gone down. In many places, you find that the worshippers who were tribal worshippers who believed in that deity are not there anymore. They've been taken over by a different set of pujaris who do not have the same feeling for the grove that the original pujari had. So Madhav Kolis, for instance, dominated these sacred groves ever since many, many generations. And today that has in many groves changed, because the Madhav Kolis are, there are no, I mean, they were fisher folk of these streams, and there are no fish in the streams anymore. And many of them have shifted out or are not there. In the more recent past, something much more sinister has happened. And that is that there has been a move to start temple trusts for the sacred groves.
Yeah.
And they want to change this for getting more pilgrims to the place. Now, Kalubai Vagdev is not something that large number of people will come for pilgrimage. So they changed that whole thinking behind it. And the temple then that they build from panchayat trusts or trustees or getting donations has a completely different background from what that original little hut-like temple was. So very beautiful, really. They were made out of very, they were very conservation conscious. according to the old mythology of these sacred groves, they said, oh, you must complete that chapper and all in one night, because otherwise it was an insult to the dev to be left out in the open for overnight. Now those kind of concepts are not there anymore. So you are right in what you asked me. It's a complete change. And that complete change is it's changed through so many different influences, you know. Roads have come up, so outside people come. They want a picnic spot, and this is ideal here. And if you're somebody like you, he also wants to see giant squirrel mila or hornbill dekha. It's very exciting for them. So obviously this has happened. I'll show you visuals where that small little hut, which was the temple of the Madhav Kolis in the past, are now a big temple with a parking lot. I'll give you multiple examples.
Yeah, I recently went to Konkan and I was visiting Devruk and Ratnagiri areas and Sindhudurga areas, and I saw a lot of Devrais were cut down to build temples there. And I was like, why is this happening? And even in Mulshi, I remember this Devrai.
Adarwadi. Adarwadi it's called. I'll show you that.
Yeah, so that Devrai is now
really very sad.
Now it's no more recognizable.
Yeah, there was a set of 3 Devrais which are now non-existent because that's become a tourist complex. I mean, it's multiple influences.
I remember when I was in college, I used to go on bike in that area, and we used to get in the night we used to get wildlife encounters, sambar deer used to pass or
leopard would pass.
Leopard we didn't see, but
leopard would pass.
But we saw a lot of deers passing right next, literally running next to our bikes in the night. And we've had that experience, and now when we go there, it's a changed scenario.
So that's urbanization ka scenario. So it's roads coming up, urbanization coming up, change in land use very extensively, tourism coming up, the sort of tourism that is not sustainable. So I think those are things that we should really think about. And a lot of people then ask me, what is the scenario like across the country? Having talked to people across the country, there are differences in the way cultures have changed, right? But there are also some standard things that have remained. There are some traditional things that have remained. Like in Rajasthan, they still have some of these groves which are not necessarily deity presence, but they are there. Thinking still remains that some patch of vegetation has to be left intact. And there are various reasons for that. You go northeast and it's a completely different culture. And all the northeast states have got some sort of linkage to an area like that, which is managed by the local community and is not necessarily linked to a sacred shrine. Not necessarily. Can be there, may not be there. We can talk about that through a visual as well. So that's this whole differences that occur across the country. You have groves all along the Western Ghats, Maharashtra, even Gujarat. I mean, though that's not really Western Ghats, the Dang forest is full of these little groves. And they are fantastic. They're groves to the deity is the crocodile, and you know that the crocodile hasn't existed in the rivers for at least 150 years. But it's there.
I think also Goa has a lot of interesting sacred groves, and the locals are doing a good job protecting it.
And it's interesting, there are groves looked after by Christian communities.
Yeah.
So it's
and
fantastic.
They have a whole tourism designed around it, but that is completely controlled by the locals. There is no outsiders who are allowed to even post locations of those
it's also linked very often to the cobra, the nag, whatever. And a little patch which is very beautiful, you know, and quite high, its biodiversity. So you have to think of it this way, that if you want biodiversity conservation, then the ideal thing is to have large areas. Groves can't be large areas. But when you take a cluster, this is very interesting, when you take a cluster of groves in one area, where the intervening matrix around it, wildlife is still able to transact that. Right? Maybe at night movements occur, bats go across pollinating, birds go across very easily. Sometimes even amphibia go through streams from one to another, and so on and so forth. That cluster represents probably a large percentage of all the different species you can get in that region. Which is why I feel that we should now look at sacred groves from a biogeographic perspective, trying to understand how that as a network can be still preserved, in spite of the fact that the cultural feeling is disappearing. And how do you make that happen? How do you go out to people who actually own or are linked to the groves through a community, begin to understand that there is a proper scientific reason that you and your ancestors have preserved, but has got very important scientific value. I think that is the way to go, because as you rightly pointed out, cultures have changed, and if cultures have changed, we have to adapt to that cultural change, right? And give them a new purpose for doing this, which is right. If you're going to get these large temples in the middle of every grove, and a parking lot, and a place for pilgrims to sit, and garbage to be collected there, what are we going to do here? You can't tell them, "Are Baba, te देवराय आहे आणि त्याच्यासाठी तुम्ही ते वाचवून ठेवा." They'll laugh at you now. So you need to look at this afresh. So if there are groves, and this is coming to the management part of it, if there are groves which are still being managed through traditional worship and through traditional thinking, I think you should not touch those. If there are groves where the panchayat has taken over or a biodiversity management committee has been created through the Biodiversity Act, then you need to intervene as minimal as possible until you realize. So you need monitoring of that grove and saying, are you able to keep it intact the way it was? You have to decide that 10 years back, 20 years back, 50 years back, what do you want? And how are you going to be able to do that? Will you use a legal measure to do that, or will you have to use a non-legal social method? And for that, the most important thing is what is commonly referred to as SEPA, which is communication, education, public awareness. And if you can do this, and we do this at Bharati Vidyapith through school education in Mulshi, Bawal, that whole belt. And we take these school kids out there, some of them from one village or sometimes from another village, who have never known that this is something that is there in your science textbook as being structure, composition of species, functional values, cycles of nature. And that is something that we demonstrate to them in their sacred grove. And then that is a mind-opening thing that happens. So I think there is a need for revisiting this whole sacred grove concept, which was there so many years ago, and where the context has now changed. And I think that's what we need to do now.
So could you now bring out the national and state local differences
Yes.
of the SGs?
Yes. I think when you put together this bit of visuals, you will get, actually it's mind-boggling, you know. One doesn't realize the immense diversity of both nature and culture that has looked after these sites. That is really exceptional across this country. I mean, you look at this at the state level, it is perhaps a little less meaning, but you look at it from the point of view of biogeographic zones, which were something that Rogers and Pawar brought about to make national parks and sanctuaries in 1988, right? And they wrote up this planning, what was called Planning a Protected Area Network for India. And now you can actually superimpose these newer things of sacred groves as community conserved areas onto that kind of a framework. And that is perhaps the way to go. We haven't done that. We have said that sacred groves are important because they have traditional values and therefore should be conserved. We can bring in the Biodiversity Act to do that. We can bring the Wildlife Protection Act to do that. Now, in many situations today, if you talk to local people, they say, Wildlife Protection Act, the Forest Department, they are not comfortable with that for whatever reason. Good reasons, not so good reasons, because a lot of all this conservation has occurred because of the Forest Department. I have no quarrel with them for that. And they feel that some alternative should be there. I believe that when I worked with the Maharashtra State Biodiversity Board as its chairman, we went to many villages where we were trying to set up biodiversity management committees with the panchayats. And wherever there were sacred groves and we brought that issue up, there was a much higher acceptance. Now this is already 10, 15 years ago. But there was no follow-up for that. And perhaps now is the time to rework this and try to understand how all of us, common citizens who are concerned about biodiversity, relate now in a new way to these sacred groves, which unfortunately are gradually disappearing. So I think that's a very important way to do it. You bring it through school education, you train teachers, you bring it to college students. Undergraduate students are supposed to do a 2-year program on environment. Some colleges do it very well. In Bharti, we have several colleges doing it very well with us. But we need to look at how to expand that constituency. And this is something that I think will be very, very important in future. Because these represent those biogeographic zones, even though they are very, very small. And as I said, if you look at a cluster and look at their species richness, the easiest way to look at it is plants. You look at bird life. You look at butterflies. These are indicator species of a very natural ecosystem. And if you look at that natural ecosystem and say, we want to keep this naturalness, you've done it. And so you have a whole new strategy of community conserved areas which can be done through sacred groves across India.
Okay. Sir, especially in your line of work in the Western Ghats, what do you think are the threats to these sacred groves? We've already discussed a lot of threats, but what do you think the
major land use change is the biggest thing. And lots of cultural identity of the people who looked after the groves. These two things are a big hit. And if you look at the existing groves which are still in reasonably natural vegetation formations, I mean, they have the right ground cover, there's a lot of detritus lying there, there are giant trees, beautiful 100% canopy for Western Ghats, evergreen species, a large number of endangered or endemic species still present there. If you look at those kind of indications, and you look at their structure, you look at their composition, you look at the cycles of nature that are happening there, they are the ones where major roads have not reached. I think once that excess comes, you begin to see various signs of degradation. So whereas in the original, please understand this, and I think this, our audience should understand this, sacred groves were not 100% preservation. Okay. That wasn't in the minds of people, right? In some particular sacred grove, they would allow you to collect fallen wood. In another, you may even be allowed to graze your private cattle. Oh. Yeah, there were all these traditional things. Each grove had its own rules and regulations, at least in the Western Ghats here, but also elsewhere, Northeast. They all have these kind of rules and regulations that they have made, that communities have made. Rajasthan, same way, communities have made these rules and regulations. So they had these kinds of things where certain amount of what we now refer to as sustainable extraction of resources was there. So this original sort of thinking, nobody does anything from there because you will get some serious damage to your family, you may get something else. And unfortunately, the myths and the stories behind this have disappeared. And in the earlier part of my interest in sacred groves, you could go and talk to any old man, old pujari. Now I'm an old man, but whatever. So, and they would tell you the most beautiful stories about Swayambhu, how that deity appeared in that patch of vegetation or forest by itself as a miraculous thing. And somebody got a dream, somebody got a vision, and then said, okay, this must be preserved, and the deity is sitting there. So for them, it was a very live presence of a deity. So it wasn't just the grove was for the deity. It was their attachment to their ancient deities, pre-Vedic deities, very often represented by tiger, by a snake, by Wagzai of tigers, right? And they feared that animal or that thing. Many of them were because of, if we look after this, I will not get some ill effect in my family. And then there were stories about somebody breaking those rules and getting blind or something like that. So there was all this, there was part of it was fear, there was veneration, and there was also a great affection for those deities. And
so is it safe to say that some of the myths were actually protecting the natural world in a
yes,
in a very mysterious way?
I mean, absolutely, definitely. And there were also very nice rules and regulations for this, and there are lovely stories that I have myself personally heard in those days.
Can you tell me one such story that you remember?
For sure. You know, there is, in this part of the Western Ghats in Maharashtra, the Madhav Koli used to do a sort of ritual, right? And this ritual was called a kaul ritual, they used to say, kaul lawayacha. So I used to go and listen to these stories. I'll just tell one, I have several of them. And there was a small group from the villagers who had come there to ask questions from the Madhav Koli Pujari for their own life, day-to-day living aspects of this. And the way the kaul was done was to take, suppose this is the deity with a platform, then he would put 2 drops of water on the side of the deity's platform. And then he would ask the person to ask him a question, and when the question came, he would mentally put it to the deity. If the right grain that he would stick in that water falls down first, the answer is yes. Oh. If the left one falls down, the answer is no. Now, statistically, it would be a 50-50% chance, chance. But if you can call it chance, you can call it, for him, it was the deity saying this. And there were beautiful questions asked. One person had come to ask, I have to get my daughter married. And I've got 2 prospective grooms. One is in my own village, one is in the distant village. Where should I get her married? And this fellow did that call and said, Gharat nahi karaycha, bahar pat. Barapat. Let her go out. That's the right thing for you to do. And he went back very happy. The deity now had told him where to get his daughter married. But another one was classic. He looked very perturbed when he came. He said, Bala vichara. He kept asking that. And for some reason, this Madhav Koli priest was saying, बसा मी नंतर तुमचं बघतो. And he was getting very agitated. So I asked him की काय नाही त्याचं वेगळं आहे.
त्याचं वेगळं आहे.
So then he came and he said, what do you want? And he said, see, I have a patch of land, but my nephew is asking for that land, saying that it is his land. And I've been to the record section in the village, in the panchayat has tried to tell me, nobody is giving me an answer. I've spent already so much money. You understand how that money was spent, right? And आता मला ते म्हणतात की कोर्टात जायला लागेल. मी कुठे पुण्याला जाऊ? हाऊ विल आय गो टू पुणा? आय विल हॅव टू अटेंड विथ इन द कोर्ट रिपीटेडली अँड आय डोंट नो हाऊ टू डू दिस. So I thought if I put this call, I might begin to understand what is the right thing to do. The way he had said this in Marathi was very touching. What is the right thing to do? And he did this. Call ceremony was done. And he was told, it is not yours. And he looked very happy. He said, give it away to your nephew, it is not yours. And he looked very happy. So when he went out from there and he gave some dakshina and all, when he went out, I followed him out. I said, Ade, you were told that this is not yours and you are looking very happy. He said, sir, I have saved so much money going to court, talking to lawyers, this, that and the other. मला वर खाली जायला लागेल, माझी खेती कोण बघणार? So he was delighted that the deity had told him, give it away. He was giving it away and he was happy. Now see how traditional things also sometimes are completely different from what we in our culture look at very differently. We have to really experience this. If you have not experienced this, you don't understand what it really means.
Fortunately, I have attended one such Kol ceremony in a sacred grove in Devgarh. It was very interesting, and I've attended it recently in last.
Oh, very nice! You should really
last,
recount that somewhere.
3-4 years.
Because many of these things are going away.
Yeah,
and we will lose this.
But it's as you were telling me, I could feel the emotions of the villagers, how connected they are.
And very interestingly, how he didn't want the rest of the villagers to participate or know what was to be told. That this is a sensitive issue for this gentleman. He told him, wait. And now I was being an outsider, allowed to sit and listen to this. But for the other village folk, he said, no, sir, he was as good as a good psychologist, really.
So what measures can you suggest to counter this threats that we are now observing about the sacred groves, or limit the destruction of the sanctuary and the biodiversity within the grove?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question actually, and it's very relevant. There are groves which are still traditionally managed and are not getting disturbed. But I believe that the percentage of such groves will drop now faster and faster, which means we have to have a strategy and an action plan already ready to counter this negative trend. There are some which are already being partially disturbed in some way, like building a temple, for example. We think building a temple is a small thing, a little bit of that open area has been widened and temple has been built. But immediately that is followed by a new set of pujaris who start changing the very name of the deity from being an old tribal deity to a Vedic deity. And that's what the people will come for doing puja there. So you are now expecting not just the local villagers to come there, but the temple trust or the biodiversity management committee or the panchayat itself, who has generated some funds for this, for building a temple, want more people to come. And that is a pressure. We know how it works at a national park or sanctuary today. These are small areas, they cannot sustain this kind of thing. And then immediately there is waste and garbage being thrown there. There are picnics there, which never used to happen. Nobody had the thinking that a sacred grove was meant for having a picnic.
Yeah.
Today, that is a different trend. So I think for them, it is very important if the grove has now been taken over from its traditional management system to a trust, then we need to be able to communicate this to the trust that yes, this is a sacred space, but the forest is also important for many other reasons, like conservation of biodiversity, which has long-term implications for you. And it's very difficult to do that. If some of these groves, like I can show you in a visual, have got a water source, then non-polluting that water source is a very important part of why people conserved it in the past. And you need to bring that out with that local community. I did this when I was chairman biodiversity board for several villages and found there was a certain level of acceptance at that point in time. This is about more than a decade ago. Today, it is the economics of this which has become a problem. So how are we going to, if that local panchayat feels that I can get such a lot of money for doing this by making a temple and having pujas there and allowing parking inside and so on, will give me a lot of funding, how are we going to support this? So it is like creating the right feeling is one part of it. The educational knowledge that goes behind it, that biodiversity is important for the future, not only for you and your village, but for society as a whole, for national importance, then you bring that angle also in. So you have to have a multiple strategy type of approach where you will be able to conserve these sacred groves.
So what are the legal measures and non-legal measures
Good
to
question.
protect this? Because
Very good question. The legal measures, see the most, I would say, effective way from a biodiversity point of view would be saying making it into a community or conservation reserve under the Wildlife Protection Act. But the moment you bring the Wildlife Protection Act, there is a resistance from local people. If you feel that that is going to happen, then it's better to use the Panchayat and use the Biodiversity Act. Now, in the Biodiversity Act, the strategy is completely different because you're allowed from that biodiversity rich heritage site, it's called a biodiversity heritage site, which has to be selected by the Panchayat. It's passed through their village biodiversity management committee. And they may set up some of their own rules and regulations to manage this in a sustainable way. And here the sustainable way would be don't collect something which is not fallen down, don't cut a branch of a tree, whatever. Don't disturb wildlife, don't disturb a nesting colony of, let us say, birds that are coming in there, hornbill in one nest in a giant tree, that is something that you need to conserve. So the biodiversity management society of that, biodiversity management committee of that village can do this kind of thing. And today there are enough local people who have had a formal education who can begin to understand this as a natural resource preservation mechanism. Your water is coming from there, your services are coming from there, your sacred grove is giving you the oxygen that you breathe, right? All these things and the value for this. My personal thinking on this, if you ask me, moves beyond this. That's a tough one. And it's not easily accepted. What is beautiful about nature? What is beautiful about nature and therefore what is beautiful to you or everybody else in that sacred grove? And that is something incredibly important because it has got an aesthetic thing, it has ethical values, it has social justice. It deals with all these issues which you can link to that sacred grove. And that is the communication strategy which I think could work, because if you tell people that you are getting something out of this sacred, preserving this sacred grove, which you have not realized, but it is there, they'll understand this. If you say, I say your water is getting saved, because of the forest there, which is intact, you have got water table, groundwater rising, which comes to you in your well. You know, these are things that they instinctively understand, but we never use this. So talking to them about services, I mean, you know, when you put it into a textbook, it's a didactic thing which doesn't turn anybody on, you know. So you have to know how, by dealing with those local people, they begin to realize these things. And they're very smart to understand this. You know, we have got these smart strategies. They're the ones who are smart, yeah. We are the duffers in this. So I think it's very important to use these communication strategies. And if you look at this, Aichi target 1, Aichi targets are the one we need to do for conserving biodiversity. And people don't realize the first Aichi target is SEPA, is communication, education, public awareness, which we do very little for. I think that's where we should go.
Whenever I think about sacred groves, I always feel and now when I look at sacred groves, I feel it's in a way nature telling us that time has come. You need to really be aware of things that are happening, or you will be wiped out, because nature is going to stay. Nature won't wipe out, but humans may wipe out, and it's nature's way of telling you that
giving you a little
jag jao abhi. Sir, I'm sure you've had so many encounters with the locals. How difficult it is to make them understand the importance of conserving this sacred groves in today's time, and is it really necessary in today's time conserving? Because a lot of time I hear these stories that नेचर है, खुद का खुद देख लेगा, इवॉल्व होता ही रहता है, तुम लोगों को क्या पड़ी है? So I always get stumbled upon in this question, because they are, in a way they are right. Nature has been evolving, and it will take care of itself. Why do we need to bother?
This goes beyond the scope of sacred groves. And your first question was how easy it is to communicate with local people. If you go to them with an open mind, and they very quickly understand that you want to know about their own lives, they open up to you very easily. I mean, some of you are photographers, so you know this, right? My trick for this is taking pictures of the children, and then the children see in the back of the camera their own picture, and they laugh and they enjoy, and then the mothers come to say, show me. So, and that breaks the ice. It's just a little trick that I use. But even more so, when you talk to them about their lifetime and the life skills that they have which you don't have, they begin to appreciate and want to actually give their knowledge to you. I think this is a very important thing. If you go to them sitting on an ivory tower, starting asking questions and noting it down, you're finished there, right? It just doesn't work. It's how closely, I don't know. For me, for some reason, this has been very easy across India. I can go in the northeast, and of course northeast people know English, so it's different, and I'm more happy in English. I go to Western Ghats, yes, I speak to them in my broken Marathi or whatever. But if I go to Karnataka or I go to Kerala, I can't even talk to them. But the communication, the non-verbal communication is very readily accepted. And I mean, they will call me for a cup of tea. I go to a Gond household in Madhya Pradesh and they say, no, without lunch we can't let you go. I've attended some unknown family's wedding ceremony where they say, you must sit with us, you must do this. Especially welcoming have been tribal communities for me. I don't know why it happens. It happens very readily, whether I'm in Gujarat in the Dang forest or whether I'm in Amarkantak and that belt of Gonds. By the way, I also feel very at home there, which is
So you're the
rather
chosen
strange.
one by nature, I could say. But
Sorry?
you're the chosen one by
No,
nature
chosen
to,
visit कुछ नहीं होता है यार.
help
It's
and
just
understand
that
these communities
I
well.
just understand them very easily and they understand me and they know that I don't have any vested interest in
Correct.
being there.
Correct.
That
I have a question out of the scope of the whole sacred grove conservation. How far are you of this rehabilitation that happens of the people, the tribal people, for national parks, for tiger reserves? How far are you, or is it very important?
yeah.
जिनका घर पूरा
It's a
वहाँ से
very,
उठे?
very complex question.
Yeah.
There is something that are human rights for every individual. But there is also the rights of a nation, right? And if we say we want to preserve India's biological diversity, okay, then we have to pay for that to the local people who are actually traditional owners of that. If you want to sort of pick them up and push them out, that is a crime against human beings. So you can't do this. And I believe that we are more and more moving towards understanding this now. So the old days of what was happening at the Narmada and all on, probably not so much there because we have now succeeded in fairly successfully moving people, rehabilitating people, fairly good villages. There have been mistakes also along the way, right? And the mistakes are there because it's a very complex individual problem. And I have lovely stories about this, but that's a separate topic. But if
But we would love to.
if you insist, I'll tell you
would
just
love
one
to
of
hear.
them.
Yeah.
I won't mention the name of the rehabilitation
that's okay.
village that I was visiting as a part of evaluation process. Nice village, whatever. But that committee was asking questions to the panchayat and to the people and old people there and whatever. And I saw these kids playing cricket. And when they saw all these bigwigs sitting there, they started pulling out their stumps and going away.
Okay.
So I called them. And I took them aside and I asked them, you have shifted here. There were some 12, 14, 15-year-olds. And I said, did you like your old village inside the tiger reserve or do you like this village? And one little fellow said, no, he told me in Hindi. Now I've told you more or less the area because he told me in Hindi. No, I like my old village there.
Oh.
And I said, no, tell me why. And the older children looked at him, this was wrong answer sort of thing. But this little fellow said, so he said, I said, why did you like that village? He said there was lots of things to play in the forest. You could not recreate that for him in a rehabilitated agricultural setup. It was a very insightful thing from that lesson from that 7, 8-year-old kid. I'll never forget it. Did we ever look at that? That this school kid wanted that as his place to play, which is so very important. Playing in nature in that age group is human development.
I think that is what is making this tribe come back in Nagarhole.
Many of them come back from many places
claiming
for the simple reason that they cannot fit into. You know who talked about this? Iravati Karve talked about this so many years ago. That you cannot take a tribal forager community, a hunter-gatherer community, and overnight turn him into an agro-pastoral or agricultural community. Doesn't happen that way. And they have their own skills, they have their own knowledge systems.
I also feel, I look at it in this way that when there was time to protect and conserve tigers because they were really on the verge of extinction and it was a bigger threat, at that time it was necessary to...
No, I think it is even necessary today.
Yeah,
But you are right, at that stage it was a critical crisis.
it was a critical crisis.
And today, yes, tigers are moving out, and we have got, I guess, it's very difficult to say how many tigers do we want. This was a question that, see, what do you want was always asked to us as trying to understand ecology, conservation, by a person called W.A. Rogers in the Wildlife Institute. He was a Firang, but in a few years he would say, our problem in our country is this. I mean, he had so well integrated into the Wildlife Institute and the country as a whole. And he would, if I brought up a question like that, I said, Dr. Bharucha, what is it that you want? And we need to look at that, especially when we say, oh, a degraded grove needs to be brought back. That is eco-restoration, right? But to what level of restoration do you want it has to be visualized first. Do you want it like it was 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 100 years ago, 2 generations ago? How do you put that into that time perspective? So a lot of what we talked about today in sacred groves and about sacred groves deals with both spatial and temporal issues, both time and space and nature. But finally, it is the beauty of nature, right? Nothing else except the beauty of nature.
So I have a very interesting question by one of our team members here. Srushti has come up with this question. She means to ask you, how have your efforts towards Western India helped species listed in the IUCN Red List?
No, come again.
How have your efforts towards Western India helped the species listed in the IUCN Red List?
Ouch, difficult one. Well, one of the things that we need to do now, and it's a very good question, right, is especially for flora and for fauna, we need to really, in a scientific manner, relook at by doing assessments of them. And there is a scientific proper way of assessing species abundance, species threats, and so on. And coming up, IUCN has a way of doing that. And you'd use that protocol to be able to say where do you place your species and what sort of conservation measures will you need. I think this thing of, I can look at myself and say this, right? I love giant squirrel, so giant squirrel must be conserved. I think we have to, unfortunately, move out of that mindset. We have to become scientists in a certain way, and that comes from a good scientific rigor. But if you look at history, oh, what a beautiful question that is really. If you look at history, the majority of, in the last several decades, of individual species that have been brought back, right, from the brink, are somebody's love, somebody's affection. I can mention several of them. I don't know whether that's appropriate to do, but the Barasingha of Kana came back because two people felt, ye jayega to, this is something that I love, I want it back.
Lesser florican.
One was a lesser florican was like that. Bustard is like that, which I was involved with. So I love the Great Indian bustard, and my father told me about counting 100 bustards in one drive somewhere near Sholapur in the 1940s, and they stopped counting when they counted 100 bustards.
Oh.
And in the same place, same region, I don't know exactly where he had gone in the 40s, I once saw 13. And I was thrilled. But when he saw 100, he stopped counting. But when I saw 13, I was at the top of the world, right? The Siberian crane from Bharatpur, we lost because in time we did not do something about it. And it was not us, it was Afghanistan, it was Pakistan, Afghanistan, what was happening all along its migratory route, which finished our Siberian cranes, but China still has them, right? So much of this that has happened because somebody loved the tiger, somebody loved the elephant. Tiger project came out that way. Elephant project came from people who passionately loved elephants. I think passion is the biggest trigger for conservation. And in my life it has been so, I'm afraid.
Yeah. So because you just
I'm not a scientist, right?
Yeah.
I am a passionate lover of wildlife.
So because you just mentioned the tiger conservation, you've always been a part of National Tiger Conservation Authority.
Not always, some period of
For
time.
some period of time in your life, you've been part of the National Tiger Conservation Authority. What do you think is the success story of that time, or a story that you would like to tell proudly of?
No, I think it's huge. I think what they have been able to achieve, not just the NTCA, but the whole thinking from the 1970s, 72 very specifically, on doing something for the tiger, brought about this whole concept that the tiger needs a certain specific habitat. And that is very different across the country, which is why we don't want one tiger reserve or two tiger reserves. We'll have to spread them across all biogeographic regions. Going back to Rogers and Pawar, is very critically important. That if you save the tiger, you will save it. You can't save the tiger without saving its habitat, right? And those habitats have to be large enough because the tigers need that sort of area. And so that thinking which changed, I think, saved the tiger. And to me, it is the most important conservation effort that perhaps has happened in the world.
Yeah.
And when you really get down to it, it was the forest department in India. Let's face it, I mean, many people say, forest department kuch karte nahi hai, ye nahi hota hai, wo nahi hota hai, whatever other things are there. But finally, what we have managed to do from the 1950s, 60s, 70s to today has been an effort of the department.
Yes.
And to an extent the ministry, but there have been lots of other inputs into it. The NGO sector that got triggered by this, right? Tiger lovers. I mean, I call them tiger lovers.
Tiger lovers.
Okay, they played a very important role. Research organizations, the BNHS, the WWF, Wildlife Institute of India, enormously important because they did all the scientific census work. If they had not done this, we would not have known where we stand today, that we have 3,000 tigers, we would not have been known at all. And there have been stars in all this. Yeah. There have been very passionate, and all the stars have come out of this thing that I referred to earlier, which is passion.
Yes.
And they were passionately fond of what they did, and they wanted this to happen.
Yeah, I also feel very proud of the forest department whenever I think of the success of the tiger project. Right. But I also feel now it's time to also pay attention to the lesser known species that are slowly extincting, like Indian grey wolves are there, the jackals are there, was on the brink of extinction, or the genetic modifications are observed. Now it's time to pull up our socks again and do something, achieve something more like Project Tiger.
I think it's already happening. Yeah. I mean, people now suddenly are talking about pangolin because we know that that's become an exported market, right? So much of this data in the recent past has come out with camera traps. Okay, things that we thought. I mean, you want to know about my personal one? Yeah. My personal one is the smallest cat in India. It's called the rusty spotted cat. E.P. Guy, if you know that, when did he write it? E.P. Guy wrote in 1950s about India's wildlife, right? So I must have read it when I was in school. And he wrote that this species is probably extinct. A friend of mine, Bharucha, Bansda, and I located it in the Dang forest, and I had a small project to do this in the 1980s, and we found it back. So we rediscovered sort of the rusty spotted cat after a gap of 30-40 years. And then we found that there were a few skins in BNHS. And we thought it must be very localized, and that this is the last bit of the Dang forest where you get it. But then camera traps across here, there, all over India started showing up rusty spotted cat here, there, everywhere. And so it is there. It is uncommon, but it's spread widely in small, small pockets. Surprisingly, very often near villages because they started eating garbage and so on. And it's probably one of the smallest cats in the world, and it's very beautiful. So
I'm yet to see it in the wild.
It's tough, but you'll get it on so many camera traps now.
Also, the other favorite of mine is the leopard cat.
Beautiful animal. My last leopard cat I saw in Mahabaleshwar about 20 years ago. I haven't seen one now.
I also want to see one in the wild.
These small cats are beautiful.
Yeah.
They don't like to call it lesser cat now. You just say small cat.
Small cats.
They change all this thing.
So how do you think the climate change is affecting everything? Or is the climate change real?
So you are a question in you look at today what has happened. It's raining cats and dogs outside. Yeah, why do you need any more evidence?
But people don't believe it. Unfortunately, people have this
and now
tendency.
there's no use calling it cats and dogs. You have to call it elephants and rhinos or something like that. And that's all extreme weather events with huge impacts. Where every villager you talk to who has his own field will tell you, Sahib, Sagla, but these other they don't know when to plant, they don't know when to take out, they lose their crops. Where is the... I mean, it is not a questionable thing at all.
But do you think climate change is also affecting the sacred groves conservation in a way?
Sacred groves, I don't know. Yes, I think all plant life will over time get affected. Because plants, just like humans will have to adapt to climate change, plants also have to adapt to climate change. Animals also have to adapt to climate change. They have to move towards areas where they can still find the right habitat. It's a very complex issue. I speak to IIT and people and trying to understand what will happen. There is a lot of speculation. There are a lot of good models. We begin to understand more and more of this. For our country, we have to do mitigation, which is, now you are taking me into very hot water.
Sir, I'm just giving
action.
an introduction of the next podcast that we might have with you.
Okay.
To people who are watching this.
We need to do climate action. There's no question of that. That is mitigation, trying to find ways to reduce the amount of carbon that is put back into the atmosphere by human beings. And then traffic, thermal power plants, whatever. The important thing for our country is this is not going to become less even if the world does things for several, maybe 100 years, 200 years, we don't know. So we have to adapt to what is already happening and what is likely to happen in the future. So we need both these strategies of mitigation and adaptation. But just like we also will have to adapt, will the giant squirrel be able to adapt to the lack of canopy? I don't know. We don't know. So we have to take a precautionary principle now and use that precautionary principle. But remember, there's no law for this. So we need to do the best we can in terms of climate change. What will get very badly affected will be grasslands, because grasslands are the most prime areas where we will need either wind or solar energy. And if we are going to use all our natural grasslands, which are very rich in grassland biodiversity, wolf, chinkara, blackbuck, reptiles, Some of the things we don't even know about grasses which are there, about flowering plants which are there in grassland, we don't know. And if we are going to massively convert that for climate action, which needs to be done, how are we going to be able to balance the needs of biodiversity and the needs of climate action? Don't ask me that question. I don't have a ready-made answer.
It's a big question. I think it's a question that disturbs everyone who is very passionate towards both these things. To have a solution for the climate changes that are happening, but also protect the biodiversity, I think.
It really deals with a balancing act.
But so one change that you still hope to see in India's conservation efforts that are being taken.
Never thought about it. I think I can't even put one question, then I would have a very long list of questions and a list of things to do. I think the key answer to this is public awareness. How many of people like us are there in society today, in different sectors of society, right? And how do we get administrators, policymakers to be sensitized to this, to the level that some of our groups have? They're not scientists. You can call many of these people and many of your group here as citizen scientists, right? But to get beyond that and to be able to say, yes, I believe in the need for conservation and I want to contribute towards it. This contribution is the thing that we are looking for today. I think that's, if you ask me for one thing, this is what I would say.
So you mean to, or I'll ask this directly. There are a lot of citizen science apps and websites that are contributing in a good way, but still less awareness about it in the normal public. Would you like to shed light on that? How people can be of help?
You have to bring this into formal school and college curriculum. One thing that happened was MC Mehta's Supreme Court case several decades ago, which told government, and the judiciary very strongly supported this, to bring this into national curriculum. And to an extent it happened through what we refer to as infusion. Geography mein thoda environment ka dala, natural resources dal diye, some wildlife things came into textbooks also. At Bharati Vidyapeeth in the year 2000, we had a very big project to do the content analysis on environment for textbooks from across the country. We did more than 2,000 textbooks to understand what should go into that. And much of this followed up in the school level with NCERT. Part of it followed up a little later with the UGC into this compulsory course of environment that should go into the first 2 years of every course, whether you are doing social science or science or physics or chemistry or whatever. In the first 2 years of your undergraduate course, you have a module of environment education, environmental studies we call it. I think that's critically important. But we need to, for that we need to increase the capacity of average school and college teachers to be able to transact that, to be able to give that in the classroom, not like a standard thing where the student reads and by heart something and gives, but feels it. And that is to be done through an action-based, activity-based learning process. At Bharati Vidyapeeth, we've done a lot of experience on this kind of work. So this is something that I think is very, very critically important. There are many small organizations that are doing this, and there are some big ones as well. Center for Environment Education in Ahmedabad, CPR Environment Education Center in Chennai. These are big ones. BNHS with its super back down history of taking people to Borivali and just showing them wildlife and showing them flora and fauna and ecosystems. I think that has to be, and it has to be done in the local language. You have to bring this out in local language. Otherwise, that connect doesn't come strong enough.
So it's been so many years that you're in the field. You've done so much work and you're still going very strong.
I've just enjoyed myself.
What keeps you motivated?
My love for nature.
It all comes from the nature. So it's been honor to have you here. And मला खूप आनंद आहे की तुम्ही जंगल इकोसच्या या भागामध्ये येऊन थोडं सॅक्रेड ग्रोव्सबद्दल आणि इतर बऱ्याचशा टॉपिक्सबद्दल बोललात. आय एम व्हेरी हॅपी दॅट वी कुड हॅव यू अँड वी कुड शेअर दिस नॉलेज विथ एव्हरीबडी ऑफ द व्ह्युअर्स ऑफ जंगल इकोस. And we have a small
I think
token.
you guys are doing an excellent job. Just keep doing it.
It's big coming from you. So we have a small gift
Thank you very much.
from the Mahua store. These are the gifting partners.
Thank you very much.
And they have one small request. If you could open the t-shirt and just show what design it is, because it's a mystery for us as well.
Oh, that's very beautiful. Thank you
Care
very
and
much.
conserve. Thank you once again, sir.
you.
Thank you for, I'll just keep this here. Thank you once again. Thank you for taking out time. And I hope you come back again
We should try
to
and do
talk about some different topics altogether, to talk about something else than sacred grove conservation. And hope we together can make,
Oh, there are many things we can
bring
do
out
together. There are many
some
things
difference to the society, and we can attract more people towards the work of conservation that we all are heading towards. Thank you.
Thank
sir.
you very much.
Thank you so much. जंगल एकोस. जंगलातल्या अनेक गोष्टींबद्दल आपल्याला इधर खूप माहिती असते किंवा खूप कमी माहिती असते. पण जी लोक ह्या जंगलांमध्ये वारंवार जात असतात, ह्या जंगलांमधल्या वेगवेगळ्या एलिमेंट्सवरती अभ्यास करत असतात, रिसर्च करत असतात, PhD करत असतात, ह्या जंगलांमधल्या जंगली प्राण्यांबरोबर आपलं अख्खं आयुष्य घालवतात, अशा माणसांशी गप्पा मारून आम्ही या जंगलाची खरी ओळख तुम्हा सर्वांसोबत शेअर करतो. जंगल एकोसचे हे भाग तुम्हाला जर आवडत असतील तर प्लीज लाईक करा, शेअर करा, सबस्क्राईब कराच. आणि ही जंगलाबद्दलची आणि संवर्धनाबद्दलची जी काही माहिती आम्ही तुमच्यापर्यंत पोहोचवतोय ती इतरही नागरिकांपर्यंत तितक्याच प्रेमाने पोहोचवा.